Cosmetic Podcast.
This podcast amplifies the topics you want to hear about.
Cosmetic means being a person or thing that gives rise to something that is dynamic or energizing.
Globally minded and locally focused.
I'm Roderick Ross.
I'm Keith Benson.
So today we are talking about, does your beginning determine your end, and why zip code matters?
Zip code matters.
Zip code matters. So this whole idea that depending on where you were born or where you were raised really weighs heavily in how successful you are as an adult.
Yeah, so there's one study out there that showed that a baby that was born in the zip code in the French Quarters in New Orleans has a life expectancy of 55 years.
55 years old.
That
is not very long at all. That's you right now.
Almost.
Okay, then.
In 20 years.
We'll see. There you go.
A few miles away, though, a baby is born in a different zip code, and their life expectancy is 80 years.
That is almost a 30-year swing. That's insane.
Yeah, and so I grew up in Portsmouth, Virginia, and my zip code that I grew up in, 23704, P-Town. Right. You know something about that?
No, P-Town. Only people from Portsmouth say that.
Yes.
P-Town.
But so you take 10 years there of my life, and then when I switched to 23321 Chesapeake, Virginia, life changed. Okay. And so I went from a community that was surrounded by it was in the projects.
Yep.
Dale's home, one of the few projects that's still left standing in Portsmouth, Virginia.
Yep.
And then we moved to Dunedin in Chesapeake, Virginia. And man, when you talk about life changing, I went from a predominantly African American community to a predominantly white community. And that was the first time that I was introduced to the N-word.
Wow.
And I didn't know how to handle that.
I mean, I can imagine that could be jolting. So what happened? What was different for you in your life when you made that zip code change?
Yeah, so I mean, you go through this process of going through a predominantly African American school and seeing teachers who look like you,
right,
and encouraging you to go into a community where, man, in the whole school, you only have but a few people that look like you.
Yeah.
And you know that because you all hang around it
all together. You clump, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I went to when we moved out to Chesapeake, Virginia, the quality, I believe, in the education, I think, changed.
Huh.
And I would say the quality in the education I felt shifted in comparison to the care for me shifted.
Oh, so for some of the things that you gained, you felt like you lost some things when you changed zip codes.
Exactly.
Well, a Harvard economist named Nathaniel Hendren in the New York Times kind of supports your experience, and he talked about the potential for climbing the income ladder in the United States is really dependent upon your hometown, upon the access that you have. Where you grow up really does matter. I spent my entire childhood in Brooklyn in a low income space, and I will tell you that many of the people that I were around, they didn't finish high school, they didn't really have aspirations to go to college. What they considered successful and what I consider successful now are two different things, and you really do kind of feel like, is there something wrong with me when you have this different ideology and this different idea of what success looks like? But there were definitely things that I didn't have access to in my childhood that my kids, by far, that's just the norm for them.
And what do you think was the biggest difference there?
Money. Like the biggest difference was money. So, in certain zip codes where you have choice in the grocery stores you go to, you have choices in what kind of health professionals you see, you have choices in whether or not you'll see a specialist for something that you may be experiencing, you have choices in what kind of extracurricular activities you participate in, right? Or do your parents send you not only to that extracurricular activity, but on top of that get you private coaches and private tutors so that you really can excel. When you live in certain zip codes and that's not your reality, you don't get access to that, and it puts you behind the eight ball. It really helps some children excel and be better at certain things than other kids, not because one kid is better than the other. It's just that one kid didn't have access.
Right. People think health is a personal choice also, but
Right.
not entirely.
Yeah.
Been talking to Dr. Maddock with Texas A&M School of Public Health. He says that health is a multi factor, and so it depends on genetics, it depends on behavior, and that behavior is greatly affected by someone's environment. And so growing up in certain communities, the health access is not as easy. So you don't have, primary, folks who are uninsured there don't have direct access to primary care. They have to go to, a general place to be able to get care. And so they're not spending that time that they need with their doctor to be able to ask those different questions. And in a lot of cases is, they kind of ashamed in some ways to ask different questions or don't know what questions. They know they're hurting. I hurt here, but, it's that second or third additional question that's really needed to find out what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's not just accepting the first medicine that they may put out to them.
Right. Or if the doctor, suggests that you do certain things or eat certain foods and you don't have access to those foods or you can't afford to buy those foods. I know my mom and dad are both from North and South Carolina. And so growing up, healthcare was definitely a challenge for our family. And so I remember many a times with home remedies for stuff. I don't know what the long-term outcome of Vicks on your chest is, because I had a lot of that as a kid.
Did you have a castor oil?
We had castor oil. We drank mineral oil. I drank stuff that didn't have a label on the bottle. I don't know what I was doing.
So how does castor oil work for the ear and for a cold?
Well, it's a multi-dimensional approach. It is what we had in the cabinet, and sometimes you just had to trick them babies into thinking they getting better.
Right. I'd have been drinking some plenty of time drinking some castor oil.
I don't really know. I know one thing. I didn't feel better, but it took my mind off my sickness because it was so nasty, and I had to just deal with that. Yeah.
I mean, when you talk about the natural environment, think about one who is raised up in Texas versus Minnesota.
Yeah.
So in Texas right now, we're crying about, the little 50, 55 degrees. And, we got on our winter jackets out here. But in Minnesota, they, matter of fact, got a report -5 the other day when it was 70 degrees here.
Wow.
And when you think about from an exercise standpoint, at a minimum in Texas, you can just get outside and just walk, regardless what environment you may be in. But when you grow up in an environment like Minnesota, and then you also maybe in a low-income area, you don't have access to a place to be able to go exercise or just be active and move around. I mean, that makes a big difference.
It does make a difference. I mean, also think about, the quality of life in certain areas. So my children, having been born and raised in Texas, it's nothing for them to just run outside their front door and just run around, no shoes on, play in the grass, just run up and down the block. Well, I wasn't really afforded that opportunity. Like, there were sometimes I didn't go outside or couldn't go outside because things would be going on, or you have to go out the door and down the stairs and through the building. Like, just going outside and running and being a kid wasn't always that easy, depending on where you grew up. And then think about kids who are in really rural areas who may live on farms or something. I mean, they really get to just go out and run around and explore and be different based on the zip code that they were born into.
Right. So in 23704 in Portsmouth, gunfire was nothing but a thing.
Right.
You heard that at night. Pow, 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 pow.
Not even surprising.
That was a norm.
Yeah.
And then when I moved to 23321 in Chesapeake, it was dead silence. So for fun, at 23704, we were outside playing hide and go seek, running around, playing flag football. Not flag, I'm sorry, because we didn't have anything to pull. You just play hot potato. You throw the ball up in the air, and you catch it, and you got to run through everybody just to score. That
sounds kind of violent.
Yeah.
Oh.
But then when I moved to 23321, guess what?
Y'all had flags?
No, we didn't have flags. But it was me and my brother played one-on-one touch football.
Oh, okay.
Now, can you imagine that? I'm saying I'm the center and the quarterback and the running back.
Well.
And so I say down, sit, hut.
And threw the ball to yourself?
I threw the ball to myself, so I had to throw it in such a way and run it and catch the ball by myself.
Hold on. You threw the ball to yourself.
Threw the ball to myself. So I went from this environment of what was quote unquote supposed to be tough, rough, and bad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
To this environment that is nobody's outside playing.
Wow. Well, what were the other kids in the neighborhood doing?
They were in the house.
Doing what?
You got me.
You didn't go in their house, huh?
I didn't go in the house. I told you when I got to the neighborhood what happened to me.
Well, you did.
Yeah.
You did.
And so, I mean, there's differences when you talk about going from where some people take some things as a negative. When I grew up my first 10 years in the projects are some of the most memorable, fun times that I know.
Because the thing is, you don't know as a kid that you're in the projects, right? Like, I didn't know we were low income. I just knew that's where we lived. That's where all my friends were. You knew what to do when they got to shooting or someone was fighting. Like, you didn't know. You just were a kid.
Right. And then so, when you think about the YMCA and where our YMCAs are located, I mean, we're located truly in all different
every kind
types
of
communities.
Yeah.
And so, from a programming standpoint, we get to be able to put in a program like the Y Achievers program. The Y Achievers program is our career development and college readiness program, where we're able to give these tools to young people, give these skills to young people in such a way to get them prepared, get them focused on going to college.
That they may not necessarily have access to, or those conversations aren't organic in the household because of the zip code. They also have early learning academies at some of the YMCAs here in Dallas.
Say a little bit more about that.
So these early learning academies are focused in neighborhoods where the children are performing below grade level or worse than their counterparts at certain grade levels just because they don't have access to early childhood education. In some instances, these children's first experience with school is kindergarten, whereas their counterparts in other parts of the city and other zip codes that are more affluent, they've been in Montessori's, they've been in early learning centers since they were 1 or 2 years old. They've mastered certain things that these kids are just trying to pick up. And so the YMCA going in and being nimble enough to kind of even the playing field, so to speak, and offer these kinds of opportunities is really a great thing.
Yeah, and so one of the things that we got to do as individuals is that we got to be able to help change the narrative. And some of this is that we may have to get involved with policy. So what is happening in your local community? What is happening in your state? How do you give a voice to this? And so when you think about, I think about South Oak Cliff High School, and the young people there, they were tired of their school looking the way that it was.
Yeah.
And so these students gathered together and they did a walkout and put these demands in such a places that, hey, we need to be educated in a different environment.
In a healthy environment. And that new school, the new iteration of South Oak Cliff is amazing.
Yes.
It is a very nice school. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, the other role that we can play is kind of being the gatekeeper, right? Like being the place where people can convene, being the organization that advocates for unheard populations and saying, hold up, this may not fare well in this community, or have you thought about, or did you talk to, or here, let's just offer this neutral space so that, folks can listen to one another.
Well, man, this has been great talking about this. Yep. We got to go out and make a change. So thank you for listening to Cosnetic,
where our conversations are global,
globally minded, and locally focused.
Check us out at www.ymcadallas.org/Cosnetic.
And as always,
stay dynamic,
stay engaged,
stay Cosnetic.